With this Kiato build, you can make him insanely strong, but the main thing that makes him really powerful is actually going to be his kit. As his skill 1 cross slash is a single target skill 1 with 90% of attack and magic attack as damage ratios, and basically what this skill does is whenever he has a buff on himself, he will then attack after granting himself a 15% damage dealt increase buff. And then onto his skill 2 Swirling Torrent. This is an amazing skill as it's on a 2-turn cooldown with damage ratios of 50% of attack and magic attack, and is pure AoE. And what's so great about this skill is that it's actually really easy for you to crit with Kiato with this skill, as he will attack after granting a 10% increased crit rate buff for every active buff that he currently has on himself, which means you're going to be able to easily crit a bunch of targets whilst also doing a bunch of damages at the same time. And then my favorite bit about his whole kit is Dancing Vortex. This is a single target special skill with damage ratios of 165% of attack and magic attack, and what makes this skill so great, apart from being able to do absolutely massive amounts of damage, is that basically whenever Kiato has 2 or more buffs on himself, this special skill will be guaranteed to crit. And then not only that, he will then attack after granting himself a 15% increased accuracy buff for every active buff that he also has. And then his combined attack is just 65% of attack and magic attack, and he will attack after granting a 30% increased damage dealt buff if an enemy is taking continuous damage. So if they're taking any damage over time effects like burn or bleed or poison, for example, then you'll get some bonus damage, but this isn't really that great. And then onto his unique passive, which is honestly probably one of the largest passives in the game, as he'll grant an enthralling dance buff when an actual active buff is present. And what this will do, it'll grant himself an increased endurance and damage resistance of 5%. And whenever you stack this up to 5 times, you will then remove all of those enthralling dances and will gain Soon to Be Idle for 2 turns, which will be another buff which will grant you a 30% increased endurance, 30% increased damage resistance, and a 50% increased damage dealt. And then his enhanced passive is just a flat damage increase, nothing too special. And then next up we have all of his best gear and stats. And the best gear set for him is obviously going to be the Ominous gear set, as he's a blue attacker, so you want to be able to do as much damage as you possibly can. So we're going to be going for the 2-set Ominous Whip bonus, which will give us a 7% increase in attack and magic attack. And then we'll be using the Ominous Whip with attack main stat, as well as the Ominous Crystal with also attack main stat as well. And then the next gear set that I'd probably recommend is going to be Resolute Judge, as considering he's based off of just critting and guarantee critting, you don't really need to run any sort of crit rate on him, which means the Resolute Judge is going to be the perfect gear set for him, as on the 2-set bonus you can just get a flat increase in 7% of crit damage, which is going to be really good. And when you use the Judge's Crossbow with attack main stat, as well as the Judge's Seal with attack main stat, you can stack a bunch of damage. The Seeker of the Deep Sea set is going to be amazing, as you can get a 5% increased speed buff for 2 turns at the start of a wave, and then this should also help him stack crit rate and also accuracy when you use his skill 2 and also his special skill as well. And when using the Conjure of the Deep Sea with attack main stat, as well as Essence of the Deep Sea with attack main stat, you'll also be set to go. And then next up, if you didn't want to run the speed set because you don't have it, but you might have this gear set, for example, the Ancient Hunter set is also a decent set that you can run on him. For this, you'll want to use the Hunter's Bow with attack main stat, as well as the Hunter's Boots with attack main stat as well. And then the final gear set I'd probably recommend is going to be the Chilling Breath, as with it on the 2-set bonus you can get a 10% increased crit damage buff whenever you use your special skill, and when using the Frozen Axe as well as the Frozen Spike with the main stat of attack, you'll be able to do even more damage as well, which is really good. And then for stuff like its accessories, all you really want is going to be ones that give you attack main stat and also crit damage main stat, and that's pretty much it. So then next up, what are going to be all of his best substats? Well, of course, things like attack, magic attack, crit damage are all going to be great. You don't really need crit rate on him unless if you want his skill 1 to crit, as his skill 2 and his special skill are very easy to crit with, so you don't necessarily need any crit rate on him. And then next up we have all of his best talents, and starting off with attack talents, and he's got a lot of different combinations that he can use. As the first thing I recommend they use is going to be the Sharp Mind buff alongside the increased crit damage buff, as considering he's a crit based DPS, you're going to have him be critting like a bunch and pretty much all the time, so having that extra crit damage is always going to be great. And then pretty much you're going to then pair that with Sharp Mind, as that's pretty much the next best thing. But in actual PvE, Ferocity is actually going to be a really good option, because Kiato is pretty much just a single target nuker and can do a bunch of damage, especially to bosses. So the Ferocity one, also paired with the increased crit damage one, is also great. And then for the Carlstone slot, I'd recommend either the attack and magic attack increase one, or the one that gives you extra crit damage. And then for defense talents, it's pretty much just the same as always. Increased defense of 20% is always great, alongside endurance as well. The extra crit resistance and defense is always fantastic. And then for the Carlstone slot, just the flat defense will be just as good as pretty much anything else. So for support talents, there's probably 2 combinations that you can probably use with him, which is going to be the Swiftness one to give you the extra special points whenever you use your special skill, as well as the increased damage resistance one. For the next combination, you can also go for the increased accuracy and penetration as well, as once again his special skill will help increase your own accuracy, so this will also help even more. And then Mage's Blessing is also great, as you can then reduce the cooldown of your skill 2 to then pretty much be able to spam it eventually. That's if you actually rock the 20%. And then for the Carlstone slot, just the one that increases speed is always going to be good. And then next up we have all of his best skill pages, and for me Chief's Appearance is going to be his best best in slot skill page, as it gives you a guaranteed flat amount of crit damage of 12%. And then his own skill page, Dance of Determination, is also really good, as you can have a 40% chance to attack after granting a 20% increased crit damage buff, as pretty much once again, you just want to crit as much as possible with him so you can do as much damage as you possibly can, which is why the skill page is actually really good. And then if you do actually come up against some team comps that do actually apply damage over times, or bosses that apply damage over times, you can remove those continuous damage effects to then give you even more buffs as well. And then Insincere Man is also like a somewhat actually sort of runnable skill page on him, and he's probably one of the only characters that actually can run this skill page, just because you're going to be stacking up as many buffs on Kiato as much as you possibly can. This skill page is always going to be decent because it'll give you a 30% increased accuracy buff for one turn on having 3 or more active buffs, which you should be able to have relatively consistently. And then we've also got stuff like Lion Spirit for the all attack increase, Pride of the Wizard King, and Scorching Grudge are all great because they'll also give you just an all attack bonus of 10%. And then of course Breath of Darkness will also do very similar things, giving you the all attack, and then Mysterious Ancient Book to give you even more damage. So next up we have all of his best teams, and obviously starting off in every team we're going to have Kiato, and then I think one of his best pairings is definitely going to be Rades Spirito, as Rades not only applies a bunch of different buffs, but they also help with survivability as well. And then alongside those two, I think William Vengeance is going to be probably one of the next best things for him, and is probably the best support for Kiato, as his skill 2 Pulse of the Magic Tree will grant him this increased speed level 4 and also an increased attack level 4 buff, which would give a crazy amount of extra damage bonuses, as well as actual mobility bonuses as well, and speed increases, which are always really good. And then also being able to apply that overall fortify buff to your whole team is really good, as well as being able to give counter attacks. And then after that you can go ahead and put someone in that can actually hinder the enemy team. For example, someone like Lotus is always really good. Or you can play around a bit more sustainability and actually keeping all of your health and defenses up, as she has increased defense buffs as well as also continuous HP as well. And the same also applies to Kahono as well, as she's also a great fit for Kiato, as she will give all of your allies all attack buffs, as well as other barriers as well, and also defense buffs, as well as increased HP recovery buffs. Or you could go for someone that is just a complete damage support in Gauche. And then finally up, we have his skill level priorities. And of course, Dancing Vortex being his special skill is going to be the one that you want the most, as Kiato is basically just a one-shot specialist, so in order to increase the chances of you doing that, you're going to want to increase the damage of this skill, as you can get 20% increased damage for attack and magic attack every time you level up this skill. And then following that is going to be Swirling Torrent, as especially when you're doing stuff in Arena, this is going to be where a lot of your AoE damage is going to come from. And then finally after that, it will then be Cross Slash, as it's going to be probably the skill that gives you the least amount of damage, as it doesn't have anything to help with it critting, which is probably why you want to upgrade it second to last. And then finally the Combined Attack is going to be the one that you want to do. I would never really recommend doing this anyway, as it's too niche for you to even get the increased damage dealt buff, as you need to take continuous damage. But for whatever reason, if you want to do it, you can go ahead, but I really wouldn't recommend it to level this one up at all. So there you have it. That is a complete guide for Kiato. He's honestly my favorite character in this game. I love him a lot, as I just love how his kit works and functions. But if you did enjoy this video, then don't forget to like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below whether this video helped you or not, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.